They always say that moving into a homeowners association neighborhood means peace, order, and security. Rules for the lawns, rules for the mailboxes, rules for the soul. I believe that once, when we signed the papers for the pale beige house at the corner of Juniper Drive, I thought we'd finally made it the safe, quiet life my wife, my daughter, and I had dreamed of. The place even smelled like fresh starts. The grass had just been cut, the paint was crisp, and the air held that faint sweetness of lilacs from a neighbor's yard. For a while, everything was calm. Our daughter, Maddie, was 7 then, small, bright-eyed, with a laugh that had the strange power to heal the worst days. She was born with a motor disability that made her left arm and hand weaker. We'd spent years teaching her how to do everyday things: tie shoes, zip jackets, draw, hold her toys steady. She tried so hard. Every milestone she hit was a small miracle. When we moved in, we thought this community would be good for her. A place where she could play outside without worry, make friends, feel normal. We even met a few kind neighbors at first, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders from across the street, who always waved when Maddie drew chalk flowers on the sidewalk. And then there was Karen. Her real name was Kara Henderson, but everyone called her Karen behind her back and sometimes to her face when they were brave enough. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, the woman who carried the covenant rule book like a weapon. Every week she walked her dog, a shrill Pomeranian named Tinkerbell, and inspected lawns like she was conducting a military parade. We met her on our third day. She came right up our driveway, clipboard in hand, smile stretched tight as a wire. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm the HOA vice president," she said. "I just wanted to introduce myself and remind you of a few little guidelines." She pointed at our trash bins. "Those need to be pulled in within 30 minutes of collection, City Ordinance 2.7. You'll find that rule in your welcome packet. Oh, and the garden gnome on your porch, adorable, but technically non-compliant with Section 4.2. She said it all like she was giving blessings instead of warnings. My wife, Lena, thanked her politely, and I forced a smile. But I could see it in her eyes. She was already making mental notes about us. Still, we tried to play along. I trimmed the bushes, painted the mailbox, followed every stupid line in that HOA book like scripture. Maddie even helped me plant marigolds by the sidewalk. But it didn't take long before Karen found new reasons to show up. Sometimes it was our grass being half an inch too tall. Sometimes she claimed Maddie's sidewalk chalk defaced HOA property. I'll never forget the day she told my little girl, my sweet, trembling Maddie, that chalk encouraged vandalism. That night, Maddie cried herself to sleep, clutching her box of chalk. I promised myself I'd keep peace for her sake. I didn't want confrontation. I worked as a police officer, and I'd seen enough ugliness in the world to know what unchecked anger could do. At home, I wanted peace. But Karen didn't understand peace. She understood control. It started small: warning letters in the mailbox, petty fines, notes taped to our door about non-standard flower color schemes. Then came the day she followed Maddie to the community playground. Lena told me about it later. Maddie had gone to play on the slide when Karen appeared, pointing out that residents' guests weren't allowed in the HOA play area without adult supervision. Maddie had lived there for months. She was a resident, but Karen insisted on verifying. She looked at our daughter like she was a trespasser, Lena whispered that night. That's when something in me began to crack. I started to document everything, every note, every picture, every timestamp. I told myself it was for evidence, but really it was because I didn't trust myself anymore. If I didn't write things down, I might explode. Then, one evening, about a month before the accident, Karen stood at the edge of our driveway, watching Maddie draw again. She didn't say a word, just stood there, glaring, arms crossed, while my daughter knelt on the concrete and sketched out a sun with long yellow rays. I stepped outside. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Just observing," she said, "making sure the sidewalk stays clean." I wanted to tell her to go to hell, but I looked at Maddie, who was smiling up at me, proud of her little masterpiece, and I swallowed my anger. "It's washable chalk, Karen. It'll rain." She sniffed. "That's not the point. Rules are rules. If we start letting one person break them. What kind of community are we? A human one, I said. Her lips tightened. That kind of attitude doesn't fit here. That night, Lena asked me to let it go again. She was right. I had a job that didn't mix well with neighborhood drama. I was a uniformed officer. Every complaint, every argument could become a report, a disciplinary mark. The last thing I needed was trouble with a civilian over sidewalk chalk. So I let it go. Or tried to, but something about Karen lingered. You could feel her everywhere, behind curtains watching, in HOA emails scolding, in whispers among neighbors who feared her disapproval. And then came the meeting. It was a Saturday morning in June, hot, humid, one of those days when even the birds sound tired. The HOA had scheduled its quarterly board meeting at the clubhouse. I wasn't planning to go, but Lena insisted. You should hear what they say, she told me. They've been talking about new playground restrictions. So we went, the three of us. Maddie sat quietly beside me, coloring in a notebook while adults argued about shrub heights and parking zones. And there she was again, sitting at the front table in a pastel blazer, Karen presiding like a judge. When it came time for open comments, Lena stood up and politely asked if the board would consider installing a ramp near the playground for children with mobility issues. I'll never forget the look Karen gave her. That playground was designed for standard access, she said. We have to think of safety for all children. We can't modify structures for every special case. She didn't even look at Maddie. The room went silent. Lena's hands trembled. I felt the heat rise behind my ears, but before I could speak, Karen moved to the next topic as if nothing had been said. That was the moment I realized she didn't just dislike us, she despised what our daughter represented. Difference, imperfection, the things she couldn't control. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. We'd wake up to find our trash cans knocked over, our mailbox flagged for inspection, anonymous complaints filed against us for noise violations, though all we ever did was watch movies at home. Maddie grew quieter. She stopped playing outside altogether. Every time she saw Karen's car, she'd hide behind the curtains. And that was what broke me most, not Karen's cruelty, but the fear she planted in my child's heart. I began parking my patrol car in the driveway, thinking maybe the sight of it would make her back off. Instead, it seemed to fuel her. One evening, I caught her taking photos of my cruiser with her phone. When I confronted her, she smiled and said, just documenting potential misuse of property. Some people like to flash their authority around where it's not appropriate. She turned and walked off before I could reply. If I'd known what was coming, I might have left right then. I might have broken the lease, packed up, moved across the state, anything. But hindsight is cruel. It whispers all the things you should have done when it's too late. Because the next week, the week everything shattered, started just like any other. Maddie wanted to set up her lemonade stand. It was her little summer project. We'd made a small wooden stand together, painted it bright yellow, with a sign that said, 25 cents a cup for puppy treats. She was saving to donate to an animal shelter. That Saturday morning, the air was soft and golden. Lena was inside baking cookies. I was mowing the lawn, and Maddie was at her stand, waving at passing cars. Then, like a dark cloud crossing the sun, Karen appeared. Clipboard, sunglasses, the inevitable dog trotting beside her. I turned off the mower. Morning, Karen, I said, forcing civility. She ignored me and went straight to Maddie. Young lady, do you have a permit to sell beverages on HOA property? Maddie blinked. It's just lemonade. That's not the point. There are liability concerns. If someone gets sick, the HOA is responsible. She's 7, I said, walking over. She's not opening a restaurant. Rules are rules, Karen replied, that familiar venom under her sugar-coated tone. Either you take this down or I'll have to file a violation. Maddie looked up at me, eyes wide, lower lip trembling. And that's when something in me snapped, not in anger, not yet, but in exhaustion. Karen, I said quietly, go home, please. She didn't move. I'm just doing my duty. You're harassing a child. I'm enforcing standards. You're crossing a line. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was Tinkerbell's faint yipping and the hum of distant lawnmowers. Then she took a photo of the lemonade stand, scribbled something on her clipboard, and walked off. Maddie began to cry. I knelt beside her, pulled her close, and promised, "It's okay, sweetheart. She's just a mean lady. She can't hurt us." I didn't know then how wrong I was. That night, I lay awake, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet breaths of my family beside me. The house felt smaller than ever, walls closing in with every complaint and letter. I told myself it would blow over, that bullies always burn themselves out. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the kind who burned out. She was the kind who burned everything around her. And she was far from finished, because the next morning, the morning that changed everything, began with the sound of Maddie's scream. I will never forget that scream. It was sharp and high and full of terror, the kind of sound that rips straight through your chest before your brain can even catch up. I was in the kitchen that morning, halfway through my first cup of coffee. Lena was folding laundry on the couch, humming softly to some song on the radio. It was a Sunday, quiet, bright, the kind of morning that tricks you into thinking the world is gentle. Then I heard Maddie. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the tile, coffee splattering across my shoes as I sprinted toward the front door. She was outside by the gate. Her lemonade stand still up from yesterday. My little girl stood there, crying, holding her right hand close to her chest, and standing across from her, with that same icy, holier-than-thou expression, was Karen. For a moment, the world narrowed to those two. "What did you do?" I yelled, rushing forward. Karen flinched but didn't move away. She shouldn't have been playing with the gate. It's dangerous. "What did you do?" Her jaw tightened. I told her not to hang on it. It could fall. Lena was already there, dropping to her knees beside Maddie, whispering her name, trying to calm her down. I saw her hands trembling, eyes darting between Karen and our daughter. There was no blood, thank God, but Maddie's small fingers were swollen, red, trembling. She sobbed into her mother's arms, her voice breaking into gasps. "It hurts, Mommy," she slammed it. Lena froze. I felt something inside me, something I'd spent my entire career keeping locked away, snap like brittle glass. "You slammed the gate on her hand?" I shouted. "It was an accident." Karen snapped back, her face suddenly pale. She was pulling on it, and I tried to close it before she got hurt. "You hurt her." I took a step forward before I even realized it. Karen stumbled back, one hand clutching her clipboard like a shield. "I'm calling the HOA president," she stammered. "You're out of control. You touch my kid again and you'll regret it." "Are you threatening me? You're a police officer, aren't you? That's conduct unbecoming." She turned on her heel and marched away, muttering about disciplinary boards and violence, but I barely heard her. My world had shrunk to the sound of my daughter's sobs. We drove straight to urgent care. The doctor said nothing was broken, a miracle, but her fingers were badly bruised and strained. He wrapped her hand, gave her pain meds, and told us to keep it elevated. While he spoke, I could barely breathe. Every time Maddie whimpered, I felt the air leave my lungs again. Lena held her close, whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're okay," like a prayer. But I wasn't okay. Something inside me had shifted. A quiet, volcanic pressure I couldn't contain anymore. When we got home, there was already a note on our door. It read, "As per HOA policy, homeowners are reminded that disputes should not escalate into verbal or physical altercations. The HOA board has been informed of the morning's incident. Pending review, the board will determine if further action is necessary. Regards, Karen Henderson, HOA Vice President." There was no apology, no acknowledgement, nothing but cold bureaucratic arrogance. I tore the note down and threw it across the yard. Lena looked at me, eyes red. "Don't do anything rash," she whispered. "Please, let's just file a report." But she didn't understand. I was the report. I'd worn a badge for 12 years. I'd been trained to stay calm, to follow procedure, to keep emotions out of the job. But this wasn't the job. This was my family. So I called my precinct, told them what happened. The dispatcher promised to send someone to document the domestic dispute. I hated that word, domestic, like it was some argument over noise or parking, not a grown woman hurting a disabled child. 2 patrol cars showed up that afternoon. The officers, guys I'd trained with, looked uneasy. They knew me, knew my record, knew I wasn't some hothead. "We're just here to take statements." One said gently, "You want us to handle this cleanly, right?" I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. They talked to Karen first. I watched from my window as she gestured dramatically, holding her clipboard like it was evidence. Even from that distance, I could read her lips. Aggressive, threaten me, intimidation. When the officers came back, one of them looked uncomfortable. "She's saying you threatened her with physical harm," he said. "I told her not to touch my kid again." "That's not a threat, that's a warning." "Look, Mike, you know how this goes. We'll have to file both statements. She hurt a child. We're noting that. But you understand, once this goes up the chain, internal affairs might take an interest. Conflict of interest, you being law enforcement, and all." I could see it in his eyes. Sympathy mixed with procedural obligation. He wanted to help, but the machine was already turning. By sunset, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. We saw curtains twitch, phones in hands. That quiet, poisonous curiosity of people who love a scandal, as long as it isn't theirs. Maddie slept on the couch, her hand wrapped in bandages, her breathing soft and uneven. Lena sat beside her, staring into space. When my phone buzzed again, it was my captain. "Mike, I'm getting some noise about an altercation. You okay?" "Yeah. Family thing. My daughter got hurt. Neighbor issue." "Yeah, I figured. HOA lady called the precinct. Said you threatened her. Claims you used your position to intimidate. She's lying." "I know, but the complaint's official. We've got to do an internal review. You might want to take a few days off. She hurt my daughter." Mike, he sighed, voice low. "You know how this works. Stay calm. Don't make it worse." That's what everyone kept saying, don't make it worse. As if worse hadn't already happened. Over the next few days, things spiraled faster than I could stop them. Karen posted on the neighborhood forum about a frightening encounter with an unstable resident. She never used my name, didn't have to. Everyone knew. Comments poured in. "I always thought he seemed aggressive. Scary that he's a cop. Imagine what happens behind closed doors." Lena begged me to ignore it, but every word felt like acid. Then came the letter from my department, a formal notice of temporary suspension pending investigation. 12 years of spotless service, gone overnight because one manipulative woman knew how to weaponize rules and perception. 3 nights after the incident, I saw the security footage from my own doorbell camera. It showed everything. Maddie standing by the gate trying to open it, Karen walking up, saying something I couldn't hear, Karen reaching for the gate handle, the sudden motion of it slamming shut. There was no hesitation, no accident. Just intent. I copied the file, drove it straight to the precinct, handed it to internal affairs. The investigator promised to review it. But the next morning, I got a call from a journalist. "Officer Reynolds, care to comment on the ongoing misconduct investigation?" That's when I knew Karen had gone public, and the department, terrified of bad optics, was already putting distance between us. That evening, there was a knock on our door. It was Mark Sanders, our neighbor from across the street, kind man, retired mechanic. He looked nervous. "Hey, Mike," he said quietly. "Thought you should know. HOA's holding an emergency meeting tomorrow. About you." "About me?" "Karen's pushing for your removal from a neighborhood. Says you're a danger to community safety." Lena gasped. I just stood there, staring. "You've got to be kidding." Wish I was. She's got a few people on her side, but not everyone's buying it. "If you come, maybe tell your side," he hesitated. "Just be careful, all right? She's playing this smart." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, the glow of the porch light flickering across the window. Every sound outside made me tense, the hum of a car, a dog barking, footsteps on the sidewalk. I thought about every case I'd ever worked, every report where the truth was buried under procedure, every person who'd said the system will protect you. But systems protect systems, not people. Maddie stirred in her sleep, murmuring, "Daddy?" I went to her side, brushed her hair back gently, and whispered, "I'm here, sweetheart. I promise I'll make this right." But deep down, I wasn't sure I could. The next day, the HOA meeting was held in the same clubhouse where Lena had once asked for a simple ramp. This time, the air was thick with hostility. Dozens of neighbors filled the room, some whispering, some avoiding my gaze. Karen sat at the front again, papers neatly stacked, expressions smugly composed. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began. "As many of you know, there was a troubling incident last weekend involving one of our residents and his child. Out of respect for privacy, I won't share names, but say it," I said, stepping forward. "You mean me?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Mr. Reynolds," Karen said coolly, "perhaps you should allow the board to finish before making statements. You accused me of violence. You lied to the police. You hurt my daughter." Gasps. Karen's smile didn't falter. "That's a serious accusation. I have footage." Her eyes flickered just for a second, but she recovered. "Then by all means share it. The HOA operates transparently." So I did. I connected my phone to the clubhouse TV, press play. The video showed exactly what happened. No context missing, no ambiguity. A hush fell over the room. When it ended, you could have heard a pin drop. Then someone from the back whispered, "She slammed it." Another voice, "Oh my God, that poor girl." Karen's face flushed. "That footage it's taken out of context. She was interfering with HOA property. She's a child, Karen. You're twisting, no. You've been twisting everything since the day we moved in." The room buzzed louder. A few neighbors stood up, people who'd been too afraid to speak before, and started murmuring their own complaints. About fines, threats, intimidation. For the first time, Karen looked cornered, but before I could feel any relief, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my captain. Just 2 words, "You're terminated." I stared at the screen, numb. Karen saw the look on my face and smiled. Small, satisfied, venomous. "Actions have consequences," she said softly. And that was when I finally understood. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. She'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. Because I still had truth, and I wasn't done fighting. The morning after the meeting felt like waking from a nightmare that hadn't ended. My badge sat on the kitchen counter, cold, useless metal. For 12 years, it had been a symbol of who I was: discipline, duty, honor, and now it was just a reminder of what I'd lost. Lena moved quietly through the house, as if afraid any sound might break me. Maddie was still asleep on the couch, her bandaged hand resting on a pillow. Sunlight poured through the blinds in thin, dusty stripes, lighting up the place that no longer felt like home. I wanted to scream, but instead I brewed coffee and watched it drip, because when everything falls apart, sometimes all you can do is cling to routine. "You should rest," Lena said softly. "Can't," I murmured. "If I stop, I'll think." She didn't argue. She just sat beside me, took my hand, and whispered, "We'll get through this." I wanted to believe her. But right then, the world felt rigged. Justice bent around whoever shouted loudest. And Karen had shouted loudest. That day, the official termination letter arrived, effective immediately, pending no further appeal. I read it 3 times, each word sinking deeper. They hadn't even waited for the investigation to finish. Public image came first, truth could wait. When I told Lena, she didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and nodded, like she'd already prepared herself for it. "We'll figure something out," she said. "We always do." "You don't sound sure." "Because I'm tired of pretending I am." That hurt more than the letter. By evening, the story had spread beyond the neighborhood. Local news ran a segment titled, "Officer Fired Following HOA Altercation." They didn't use my name, but the blurred photo of my cruiser in our driveway said enough. Neighbors I'd once nodded to now crossed the street. The friendly waves turned into sidelong glances, polite avoidance. The world shrinks fast when reputation collapses. But amid all that silence, one message pinged on my phone. It was from Mark Sanders, the retired mechanic who'd warned me about the meeting. "Mike, we believe you. A few of us want to help." He invited us over that night. Mark's house smelled like old leather and engine oil, familiar and comforting. His wife, Helen, greeted us with cocoa for Maddie and tea for Lena. Around the dining table sat 5 other neighbors, people I barely knew but recognized from passing hellos. Mark cleared his throat. "We've all had run-ins with her," he said. "Karen's been bullying this street for years. You just happened to be the first who stood up to her." A woman named Clara spoke next. "She fined me $300 for painting my shutters the wrong shade of blue. When I appealed, she lost the paperwork." Another man added, "She threatened to tow my truck for parking 2 inches past my driveway." The stories poured out like floodwater, each one small, but together they painted the picture of a reign built on fear. "We want to help clear your name," Mark said. "Not just for you, for everyone she's hurt." Lena squeezed my hand under the table. For the first time in weeks, something warm flickered inside me. Hope, fragile but alive. The plan wasn't revenge. It was truth. We started gathering evidence. Letters, emails, screenshots of her forum posts, timestamps of every fine and threat. Clara's son, a tech-savvy college kid, helped organize it all into a digital folder he labeled Operation Sunlight. Every document told the same story: an HOA vice president who used policy as a weapon, selective enforcement, harassment, retaliation. But we needed more than proof of bad behavior. We needed to show motive, why she had gone after my family so relentlessly. That's when Helen found something. While digging through archived HOA records, she discovered a financial discrepancy: a small but consistent withdrawal from community maintenance funds. Each check bore 2 signatures, the president's and Karen's. Mark leaned back in his chair, whistling. "Looks like someone's been skimming." We couldn't prove theft yet, but the numbers smelled wrong. And if we could trace it, maybe the board would finally listen. I should have felt triumphant, but a strange guilt crept in instead. Because part of me still wished none of this had ever happened, that I could go back to mowing the lawn and drinking coffee on quiet Sundays. But there was no going back. Only forward, through the wreckage. The next morning, I got a visit from someone I didn't expect, Officer Grayson, one of the cops who'd taken the first report. He stood awkwardly on the porch, hat in hand. "Mike, I probably shouldn't be here," he said. "But off the record, the department's review panel saw the video. IA's leaning your way. They know she's lying." "Then why am I still fired?" He hesitated. "Politics. The chief doesn't want headlines saying we protect our own. But there's talk of reinstatement once things cool down. Hope is a dangerous thing. It sneaks in quietly before you're ready to trust it again." But hearing that made me breathe a little easier. "Thanks, Gray," I said, "for telling me." He nodded. "For what it's worth, we're rooting for you." That night, Lena and I sat on the porch watching the sunset burn gold over the roofs. Maddie played quietly beside us, drawing with her left hand, the stronger one, while her bandaged right rested on the table. "You're getting good at that," I said. She smiled shyly. "Mom says I can draw anything I want." "She's right." She paused, looked up at me. "Daddy, are you still a police?" The question pierced me. "Not right now, sweetie, but maybe again soon." She nodded, satisfied. "It's okay. You're still my hero." And just like that, every battle, every sleepless night felt worth enduring. A week later, the HOA board held another meeting, this time without Karen leading it. Word had spread about the financial irregularities. The president, a timid man who usually let Karen run the show, had no choice but to call for an audit. I wasn't invited officially, but I went anyway. So did half the neighborhood. The room buzzed with tension. Karen sat rigid at the front, her perfect posture cracking under the whispers. "The numbers don't lie," Mark said, standing up. "We've all got receipts. You've been misusing community funds." "That's a baseless accusation," she snapped. "Those expenditures were for landscaping improvements." "Funny," Clara said, Because my husband does the landscaping, and he hasn't been paid in months. The crowd murmured louder. Even the president looked uneasy. Finally, I stepped forward. "You can accuse me of anything you want," I said quietly, "but you don't get to hurt people and hide behind rules. Not anymore." Karen opened her mouth to speak, but the president cut her off. "Karen, pending review of these records, you're suspended from all HOA duties." The silence that followed felt like exhaling after years of holding your breath. She stood there, stunned, then gathered her papers and stormed out without a word. Afterward, people approached me one by one, some apologizing for believing her, others just shaking my hand. No fanfare, no headlines, just quiet acknowledgement. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. A few days later, the department called. Internal Affairs had cleared me of wrongdoing. The chief offered reinstatement, same rank, same badge number. But I surprised even myself when I said, "Thank you, sir, but I think I'm done." There was silence on the line. "You sure, Reynolds? Men don't walk away from a clean record." "Yeah, I think it's time I do something different. Something that doesn't cost my family every ounce of peace we have left." He respected that. And for the first time in years, I felt free, not powerless, not angry, just free. The weeks that followed were quieter. I spent mornings helping Maddie with her therapy, afternoons repairing things around the house, evenings cooking dinner with Lena. Simple things. The kind that remind you what living actually feels like. Karen eventually moved out. Rumor said she resigned from the HOA entirely after the audit found thousands missing. The neighborhood slowly healed. Lawns stayed imperfect, kids drew on sidewalks again, laughter returned. Rules still existed, but for once, humanity mattered more. One evening in late autumn, we set up Maddie's lemonade stand again, the same bright yellow one we'd stored in the garage. She insisted on doing it herself this time, a proud grin on her face. "No more rules against lemonade, right?" she teased. "None that apply to you," I said smiling. Neighbors came, one after another, Mark, Clara, even the timid president, each dropping coins in her jar and wishing her well. At sunset, she counted her earnings, squealing with joy. "Daddy, we can buy puppy treats for the shelter again?" "Looks like it." She held up her wrapped hand, now healing, and whispered, "See, I'm strong." And she was, stronger than me, stronger than the world that tried to crush her spirit. Later, after she went to bed, Lena and I sat on the porch again. The air smelled of lemons and cut grass. Fireflies blinked in the dark like tiny forgiving stars. "You think we'll ever really move on?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But maybe moving on isn't the point. Maybe it's learning how to live after the fire." She smiled faintly. "You always were a poet when you weren't pretending to be tough." "Don't tell anyone," I said, and she laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that felt like home. In the end, life didn't hand us a perfect victory. The world rarely does. But we found peace in the small things, in morning light on the porch, in Maddie's laughter, in neighbors finally saying hello without fear. The badge may have been gone, the career over, but something deeper replaced it. The understanding that justice isn't about uniforms or titles. It's about protecting what truly matters when no one else will. And as I watched my daughter sleeping peacefully that night, hands still wrapped but healing, I realized that sometimes redemption doesn't come from winning. It comes from surviving, forgiving, and daring to believe again. Spring came early that year. The first signs were subtle, a robin nesting in the old oak, the faint hum of bees returning to the lavender bushes Maddie had planted last summer. The world was shaking off its frost, and in some strange way, so were we. It had been 6 months since the HOA collapse, since Karen's reign ended and peace slowly crept back into our lives. The neighborhood looked the same. Same houses, same lawns, same mailboxes, but the air felt different now. Lighter, kinder. People smiled again when they passed our gate. Some waved, others stopped to chat about weather, school fundraisers, or recipes. Simple things that used to mean nothing until you lose them. Lena said it best one morning over coffee. It's like the whole street decided to breathe again. And she was right. A new purpose. After I left the force, there were weeks when I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd spent over a decade defining my worth through a badge and a uniform. Without them, I felt like a ghost wandering through my own house. But one afternoon, Maddie came home from school with a flyer crumpled in her backpack. It was for a community safety workshop, first aid, conflict resolution, neighborhood watch basics. She dropped it on the table and said, "Daddy, you should teach this." I laughed at first. "Sweetheart, I'm not a cop anymore." She shrugged, her curls bouncing. "You don't have to be. You're still the best one I know." That one sentence hit deeper than any speech or medal ever had. So, I called the community center. They were short on instructors and thrilled to have someone with experience. Within a week, I was standing in front of a room of teenagers, teaching them about safety, responsibility, and standing up for what's right. At first, it felt strange, not chasing calls or writing reports, just talking. But as faces lit up with understanding, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't enforcing order, I was inspiring it. It wasn't policing anymore. It was purpose. Maddie's recovery was slow, but remarkable. Her right hand still bore faint scars, pale reminders of pain that once defined her days. But she wore them proudly, like proof of victory. She started drawing again, this time with both hands, one to sketch, one to shade. Her art teacher even nominated her for the local children's art exhibit under the theme, Strength in Small Hands. When the day of the exhibit arrived, Lena and I stood beside her in a small gallery filled with bright colors and soft chatter. Maddie's drawing was a simple one, a lemonade stand under a blue sky, a little girl smiling with one bandaged hand, and a sign that read, "Kindness wins." When people asked her what it meant, she said, "It means even when bad people hurt you, you can still be kind, because kindness is stronger." The crowd clapped. I just stood there, speechless, my throat tight. Lena took my hand. "She's got your heart," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "She's got something better." Karen's silence for a while. Karen was all anyone could talk about. The audit revealed she'd been siphoning funds for years, small amounts hidden in maintenance accounts. She avoided jail time but faced heavy fines and was banned from any HOA leadership positions across the county. Then, as quickly as she'd exploded into our lives, she disappeared. Rumor had it she sold her house and moved to another state. No apologies, no statements, just silence. At first, I wanted to hate her forever. But time has a way of dulling even the sharpest edges. One night, I found myself wondering not about what she'd done, but why. Power, loneliness, control, maybe all three. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt pity. Because people like her spend their lives trying to build walls of dominance, never realizing that real strength is in connection. So, I let her go. The way you let go of a storm once the sky clears. The neighborhood, reborn, the HOA, didn't vanish. It transformed. Mark and Clara helped elect a new board, fair, transparent, made up of people who actually lived here, not ruled it. They scrapped half the petty rules and started community potlucks instead. Every Saturday, families gathered at the park for what we jokingly called unnecessary meetings, an excuse to laugh about the old days and remind each other how far we'd come. Maddie's lemonade stand became the symbol of that renewal. Each summer weekend, kids set up small stands beside hers selling cookies, bracelets, or drawings. No permits, no fines, just joy. Once, I saw the new HOA president walk up to her, buy a cup of lemonade, and drop a 20 in the jar. "For community improvement," he said with a wink. That single moment told me everything I needed to know. We were okay now. A letter from the past one rainy morning in early May. I received a letter with the city police seal. For a second, my heart sank, old instincts. But when I opened it, I found a handwritten note from Chief Randall, the same man who'd signed my termination papers months earlier. "Mike, you were right to step away, but I want you to know, your case changed things. We've started new training on handling civilian complaints and community relations. You lit a spark, even if you didn't mean to. If you ever want to come back, the door's open. But if not, thank you for reminding us what integrity looks like." Randall. I sat there for a long time, the rain pattering softly outside. It wasn't about going back, it was about knowing that walking away hadn't been failure. It had been a beginning. Lena's garden, while I rebuilt my identity, Lena rebuilt something else, her garden. Where once there were only wilted shrubs, now bloomed rows of marigolds, roses, and jasmine. She said tending plants reminded her that healing takes time, sunlight, and patience. One afternoon, as she knelt among the flowers, she said, "You ever think about how everything we went through was just pruning? Cutting back what was rotten so something new could grow?" I smiled. I think about that every day. The garden became her therapy, just like teaching became mine. Some evenings, I'd help her plant while Maddie ran around chasing fireflies. Those were the moments that made all the scars worth it. Seeds of forgiveness one summer evening. An unfamiliar car pulled up in front of our house. A woman stepped out, gray hair tied back, a hesitant look on her face. It took me a moment to recognize her. It was Karen's sister, Susan. She introduced herself softly, holding an envelope. "She asked me to bring this," she said. I think she wanted to, but didn't know how. Inside was a brief note, shaky handwriting but unmistakable. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you know I never meant for it to go so far. I've started counseling. I'm sorry for what I did to your daughter. Karen." I folded the paper slowly. It didn't erase what happened, nothing could, but in that moment, I realized forgiveness isn't about excusing someone. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of their shadow. So I nodded and told Susan, "Tell her, I wish her peace." She looked surprised, then relieved. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what that means." Maybe I did. Full circle a year later, Maddie's school held a Community Heroes Day. They asked each student to bring someone who'd made a difference in their neighborhood. When I walked into that gymnasium, I expected to sit quietly in the back. But Maddie had other plans. As her class took the stage, she grinned and said into the microphone, "My hero is my dad. He taught me that being brave doesn't mean fighting, it means caring, even when it's hard." Applause filled the room, and I felt a warmth spread through me that no uniform had ever given. Lena clapped beside me, eyes shining. That night, after everyone was asleep, I stood outside under the stars, the same sky that had watched us through every storm. I thought about everything we'd endured, the injustice, the anger, the loss, and how it had led here to peace, to love, to purpose. Epilogue. The lemon tree by the second spring, the garden had grown so lush it seemed to hum with life. Right at the corner of the yard, a new tree stood, small, sturdy, its leaves bright green. A lemon tree, Maddie's idea. "So, we never run out," she'd said with a grin. Every morning, she'd check its progress, counting each tiny fruit as if it were treasure. And one day, a single ripe lemon hung low enough for her to reach. She plucked it carefully and ran to me. "Look, Daddy, our first lemon." I laughed. "Guess that means it's time for lemonade again." So we set up the stand one more time, a little taller now, freshly painted, a handmade sign that read, "Kindness wins always." People came, some from nearby streets, some just passing by, and as I watched my daughter hand out cups of lemonade under the same sun that once seemed to mock our pain, I realized something profound. We hadn't just survived. We'd grown roots. That night, I tucked Maddie in. She looked sleepy, content, a faint smile on her lips. "Daddy," she murmured. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think bad things happen so we can become good people?" I thought about that for a long moment. About justice, loss, love, forgiveness. "Maybe," I said softly, "or maybe good people just find a way to make something beautiful out of bad things." She smiled, satisfied. "Like lemonade. Exactly like lemonade." And as I turned off the light, I realized that in the end, we didn't just rebuild our lives. We reclaimed them. Because sometimes healing doesn't come with applause or closure. It comes quietly, in laughter shared over lemonade, in flowers blooming where pain once lived, in knowing that no matter how dark the past, the dawn always finds a way through.